Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the most important developments, especially when it comes to the ceasefire. We're having reports that Israel has given the green light in principle to a settlement in Lebanon. However, there's one big thing. The cabinet still hasn't approved this, and they're going to be meeting tomorrow to discuss the approval of this ceasefire in Lebanon. And before I get into the details of the reports coming out, I'll give you a bit of a background as to what led us to this moment and what's likely to happen, especially with the Lebanese front in general and Gaza as well. So Hezbollah, of course, participated in the Al-Aqsa flood or Tufan Al-Aqsa on the 8th of October with limited attacks on certain Israeli monitoring locations and spying locations next to the borders. And they told Israel that if you stop the war in Gaza, our attacks will stop, and that these attacks are limited, intended to exhaust as much as possible, increasingly, from the Israeli army so that they do not take out their full force on Gaza. They have succeeded in this. Israel gradually started to escalate with Lebanon, and Hezbollah told them at the time, the more you increase, the more we increase. Then Hezbollah actually implemented and followed up on all of their promises, whether when it comes to the intensity of missiles used, the weapons used, the depths of areas that they reached. And now we are at a stage where central Israel, the central occupied territory cities, are under Hezbollah fire, with yesterday being the biggest attack since this war began. Hezbollah firing up to 500 missiles in one day on all parts leading to Tel Aviv and even south to Tel Aviv, on the day where Netanyahu was actually meeting to discuss the ceasefire coming with Lebanon. And Israel did not escalate with Lebanon on a massive scale up until the recent months following the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and some of their leading figures. However, Hezbollah proved after these attacks that they are able to indeed continue and give Israel very painful blows, which is something that we have seen indeed in recent months. Israel did not prepare for a day like this, like what we're having now, to discuss a potential ceasefire with Lebanon so quickly. Israel has over 5 divisions on the borders with Lebanon, over 65,000 Israeli soldiers in total. You're talking about a number of forces enough to reach Beirut. In 1982, Israel reached Beirut in 1982. They reached Beirut in 6 days only. And now all of this campaign and all of this escalation coming primarily to save Benjamin Netanyahu, they haven't been able to hardly touch any of the Lebanese territories. And the Lebanese fighters are putting their heads in the mud, putting the genocide soldiers' faces in the mud and humiliating them every single day, including their constant attacks deep into the genocide territories inside of Israel. So they did not really want to end anything, and they were planning to occupy large chunks of South Lebanon. They assumed that by assassinating Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the leading figures of Lebanon, that they will kill the spirit of the Lebanese people, or the freedom-loving people in Lebanon, to be more accurate, and have a defeated mentality, instill a defeated mentality when it comes to the Lebanese resistance. However, what they've done only fueled the fire in the spirits of all of the resistance supporting people in Lebanon, everyone who supports human rights, everyone who supports stopping the war crimes and having equal rights and confronting this child murdering criminal entity. So they continued, and we reached a massive stage yesterday, and that proved to be a massive contributor to the signs that we're seeing coming from Israel, that they are kneeling down in the face of Hezbollah. They are bowing down, they're backing down because of the strength of the Lebanese resistance, led primarily by Hezbollah. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about a limited ceasefire that would be for 2 months. That would be followed by a permanent declaration. Benjamin Netanyahu, before the big escalation with Lebanon, he added something to the conditions of the war, to the objectives of the war. So previously, the objectives of the war only revolved around Gaza, eliminating Hamas, getting all of the Israeli prisoners of war back, and making sure Gaza does not pose a threat again. Tensions rose in Israel and protests reached peak levels. 800,000 Israelis in the streets at one point to tell their prime minister that he is a criminal, he is a mass killer, killing Israelis primarily, and giving up on the Israeli prisoners of war for his own sake, and sending people to die for no reason, apart from his own greed and his own psychopathic, narcissistic reasons. That's why he started to escalate with Hezbollah, so that he can take away and divert the attention from him to this war. He started to escalate, and he was planning to do something much bigger than what has been achieved in Lebanon. He was planning to occupy large chunks of the Lebanese territories, have settlements in Lebanon, and have instilled an internal civil war against Hezbollah through internal agents and traitors from within Lebanon. There were people in Lebanon who were hoping that Hezbollah would indeed be defeated, but Hezbollah, like the resistance in general, proved that they are unbeatable. They cannot be defeated. Why? Because they are establishing themselves on just causes, and because resistance is a side effect or an antidote to a problem, the problem still exists. So long that the problem still exists, which is in the form of this cancerous Zionism, occupying Palestine and doing all of these war crimes against the people, you will still have resistance forever up until you get rid of this cancerous problem called Zionism. So they tried to have certain talks with Lebanon after they realized that they wouldn't be able to succeed with the Lebanese resistance. At one point, Israel was trying to dictate certain measures being taken against Lebanon, have these new resolutions in to only serve the genocide entity and go against Lebanon, dictate who's involved and who's not involved. All of these talks, but they backed down. They wanted a veto against France. They didn't want their involvement out of the way. They wanted unilateral enforcement out of the way. They wanted Hezbollah to disarm out of the way. They wanted Hezbollah to back up to the Litani River out of the way. Everything is out of the way. Every single thing is out of the way, and every single thing is out of the way for one reason, purely for the strength of the armed resistance Israel is facing, because they only understand the language of force. No other talk is understood by Israel. So long as there is no resistance facing Israel, they would continue to do what they want. But the fact of the matter is, Hezbollah have prepared tremendously well for these days, and now they are imposing their will on Israel. The ceasefire we're talking about now is a proposal coming from the United States administration that would include countries. And mind you, this is something very, very important to note before we get into more and more details about this ceasefire, is that not everything has been published. As a matter of fact, the majority of things haven't been published. And that's how generally ceasefire agreements succeed, without revealing too many details initially. But what we can understand are things being clear from that agreement, especially things like Israel giving up certain conditions simply due to the fact that they are continuing with the ceasefire. But we don't know the extent of the countries involved, but what we do know is that countries such as the United States, France, Britain, Russia, Syria, and Iran was involved. But again, not a lot of clarity when it comes to that. The ceasefire we're talking about speaks about 2 months, during which Israel still wouldn't retreat fully from Lebanon. But 2 months of no fire between Hizbullah and Israel, during which certain reports said that people can start going back to the south, and Israel is saying people can also go back to the north. Now, when it comes to the Lebanese side, everyone in Lebanon is willing to, there's going to be a process, and people who are able to go back to some of their homes, they would be, apart from those that have been destroyed. But when it comes to Israel, Israel is facing a big problem. Israel is facing a massive problem with the northern settlements that they have, the squatting establishment, because they're actually releasing videos now saying how Netanyahu neglected them. Netanyahu and his government neglected them, because a part of the reason he went there was due to the fourth objective of the war, and the only one that deals with the northern front, that said we want to return the Israelis back to the north. And these people said, maybe if the Kiryat Shmone, head of the municipality of Kiryat Shmone, he said that if the government ministers will go to live in Kiryat Shmone, maybe we will go and live in Kiryat Shmone. But so far, nothing has changed, and we refuse to go back to the same reality that we had on the 6th of October. The fact that the people who are the most important when it comes to the Lebanese question from an internal Israeli perspective are having a tremendously negative approach when it comes to the ceasefire agreement indicates how much in favor of Lebanon that ceasefire agreement is, and how much it did not serve Israel with anything apart from just stopping having a ceasefire and stopping the fighting for a limited period of time. The fact that these people are saying these things in Israel, indicates that it's a massive retreat, a massive back down coming from Israel. But we're not talking about an all-out ceasefire. We are talking about a limited ceasefire, and I wanted to share some of the articles that have been published in this regard in Israeli media, just to give you a bit more information. And we will also talk about why it reached this stage in terms of defeat and massive losses internally with the IDF, the security units of Israel, and their lack of capacity to even continue the war. And we're also going to be talking about Gaza and how that is linked to Gaza. So the main articles that were published in Israel, that the green light was given. After the discussion with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, officials in Lebanon, the United States, and Israel confirmed last night, Sunday, that Israel gave the green light subject to a final decision by the cabinet, and that is tomorrow, to sign the settlement in Lebanon. On the other hand, an Israeli source claimed that after publication that although there is a willingness and principled intention to move forward, there are still things to be are on the agenda. According to him, it is not close, but the direction is positive. However, when it learned that U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein informed Lebanon last night Israel's agreement to the settlement. So Hochstein already told Lebanon that Israel accepted this settlement. However, again, we cannot confirm anything up until we have a confirmation tomorrow from the war cabinet, and they are likely to have this confirmation. And then they added that Hezbollah, of course, significantly increased the rate of fire at Israel. Here they're saying more than 255 launches. Israel yesterday confirmed that we indeed had 500 warnings coming from Israel, sirens indicating that 500 projectiles were launched from Lebanon and detected by the Israeli systems to Israel, that targeted Israel. Actually, 541 alarms in Lebanon. Now, this was one of the reports when it comes to the ceasefire talk coming from Israel, and we also had another one here continuing the talk about the potential of a ceasefire being declared within hours based on certain reports coming from Lebanon. Here they said that the American state confidently there will be a series, and Netanyahu is expected to present the details and agreement by the cabinet tomorrow, which will begin with a 60-day pilot. This was the 2-month period that we were talking about. It's going to be limited, and then we're going to be talking about something more permanent. The heads of the coalition will also meet. Officials in Lebanon claim the U.S. has informed that a ceasefire may be announced today. France will take part in the monitoring committee, despite opposition from the UN. A political official said these are the differences between Resolution 1701 and the current agreement assessment in the U.S. deal in Gaza. So the assessment in the U.S. saying that we will have a deal in Gaza alongside with the deal in Lebanon. And in Israel, they also reported that, apart from this report, it is not guaranteed that we will have a ceasefire with Gaza, not denying that there will be something to do with Gaza. Why is it not very clear when it comes to Gaza, and why might we see a certain period where a ceasefire might start in Lebanon but continue slightly in Gaza and then have a ceasefire in Gaza? It's because Israel wouldn't want to show that they are agreeing to both at the same time. When it comes to negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian resistance or the Lebanese resistance, many things are kept unpublished up until the moment we reach the deal, and many things are not published because it has been agreed upon by the two parties, primarily to save face. So from an Israeli perspective, let me give you an example. In 2014, they had a long war with many massacres in Gaza that ended after approximately 51 days, following which Hamas forced Israel to retreat up to the internal Israeli territories because they were occupying what they call the security line next to Gaza. And they also increased the capacity when it comes to fishing. None of these things were reported. And Hamas at one point had monitoring points on the borders with Israel because according to the agreement, Israel couldn't touch them, and they did not. These things weren't published initially because if they are published from an Israeli perspective, right, it would be agreed upon. Usually, again, no guarantee to be the same thing with all CISO, but I'm giving you a background so that you can know. Israel wouldn't be able to tolerate it internally. Why? Because now it's about the phase of justification. You know, not many people will tell you what I told you, like Hizbullah forces Israel to back down, or Israel submits to the will of Hizbullah and stuff like that, or the opposite. When it comes to both sides, they will try and be as diplomatic as possible, quiet. Why? Because they want things to be implemented. That's the objective. So even if it comes at a price of one side declaring victory, they would want to have this ceasefire. So, and like we said before, when it comes to Gaza, by the way, seeing as we're reading about this assessment in the United States that we'll have a deal in Gaza will most likely be followed simultaneously with this or shortly after this, so that firstly Israel would say, oh no, there wasn't necessarily a link. Israel could try and capitalize on that. Mind you might see a lot of twisted voices coming out who hate the resistance that will try and say anything negative about the resistance like they have previously. Some people would have any excuse to criticize any part of the resistance just to cover up their shameful lack of action or complicity with genocide. And again, these people are worth nothing, so it's pointless to even address them. But some people will be talking, so you need to remember that. However, when it comes to Gaza, Hezbollah sacrificed their Secretary General for Gaza. Hezbollah sacrificed their top figures for Gaza. Hezbollah sacrificed with their leaders, with their men, with their women, with their money, with their houses, with their property for Gaza. So no one can go and tell Hezbollah that they haven't sacrificed for Gaza. Hezbollah was the biggest party that sacrificed for Palestine and for the people of Gaza in this war after the Palestinians in Gaza. Hezbollah and the Lebanese people, because they directly confronted this child murdering war criminal entity to try and reach a ceasefire with Gaza. And they had all of these sacrifices. And despite the fact that it's going to be very likely that we would have a ceasefire that will be shortly done, or some sort of a ceasefire agreement. And again, remember, when we talk about the ceasefire, that doesn't mean the end of the war, and that doesn't mean a permanent ceasefire. This in Lebanon is a pilot thing for 60 days. In Gaza, ceasefire, 3 phases. This is what we initially heard, without a confirmation from Israel that they will continue. And one of the reasons that Israel is accepting this ceasefire in Lebanon is because they would still have an opportunity to wage the war again on Lebanon after they try and recover some of their losses. Because one of the main things that they're having this ceasefire with Lebanon is because their genocide troops have been going back to the genocide state in body bags from Lebanon. Hezbollah have been annihilating the genocide army in South Lebanon, and they have been annihilating Unit 8200 as well. When it comes to, and I'll get to one article, by the way, when it comes to Unit 8200, crisis you're talking about, crisis that is hidden. We have a failed state when it comes to Israel. It's a failed entity going to collapse, ladies and gentlemen. Failed army, failed security establishment, failed politicians, failed prime minister who has an arrest warrant issued against him, and his ex-defense minister now. So that's likely to happen. And also, Osama Hamdan, one of the senior figures in Hamas, said we welcome any ceasefire in Lebanon. Regardless of anything, we welcome any ceasefire in Lebanon because they have sacrificed for Gaza so much, without, again, elaborating too much, because too much talk in a sensitive period can be harmful. Why? Because, again, there are certain things that need to be protected. However, it is exceptionally unlikely that this is what we can say, because you can't be totally conclusive. Things can happen. It is exceptionally unlikely to have a ceasefire in Lebanon that wouldn't be tied in one point at a certain time with Gaza to have a ceasefire, because don't forget, we're only talking about a pilot period. This report continued. Will long weeks of talks lead to a ceasefire within hours? And then they were saying about the fact that Joe Biden had these talks about a ceasefire previously, and now we might have a ceasefire declared within hours. Who's upset? The people who are of most concern to the ceasefire in Lebanon. Who are they? The residents of the north, who have been expelled from their homes for over a year now, living in hotels or permanently leaving their residential location, or permanently leaving Israel, by the way. One of these settlements, Kiryat Shmoni, we had a poll over 2 months back in which 80% of the Kiryat Shmoni residents who left their homes said, we will not go back, ceasefire or not. Now, what did that tell you? Anthony Blinken himself said Israel lost sovereignty over the north. People underestimate the level of effect this campaign from the Lebanese resistance inflicted on this genocide entity, in particular in the north. People lost faith in their country. People are losing faith in this false idea of Zionism. They're realizing it's all a facade. So the residents of the north, they released this video here. I'm just going to try and
Looking for investment ideas? Get inspired by investors worldwide on eToro.
About Hezbollah basically still operating. Hezbollah still operating, and the fact that they have been fooled by Netanyahu.
אנחנו במאבק גדול מאוד. אנחנו חייבים בגבול הצפון לשנות את המציאות הביטחונית.
And they're quoting Netanyahu saying that we are in a big battle, we need to change the security reality.
סוף פסוק יהיה,
we will change it.
את המציאות הביטחונית שם,
it will be new reality,
בדרום.
like we changed it in the south.
אבל אנחנו בקרב על החיים, בקרב על הבית, זה לא החזמה, זה לא הפרזה, זה המלחמה. זה להיות או לחדול,
as in to be or not to be as well. And they need to cease, basically, right? And basically they're showing the soldiers of Hizbullah here, right? And all of his statements and promises to the north. And here they're asking, Bibi, are you the prime minister of Israel or are you the prime minister of Lebanon? The blood of the residents of the north will be on your hands. This video was published and edited by the residents of the Israeli north to Benjamin Netanyahu, because he's about to have this ceasefire agreement, limited, not limited, pilot, no pilot. They couldn't care less, these people. Why? Because they left their homes from their perspective. Homes on stolen lands, on stolen villages. And of course, you know, don't take it. I know some people start to talk. Of course, we know that. But I'm saying, you know, they have a problem. They have a problem with that, and from their perspective, it's the country that's promising them all of this safety, going back against everything that they have said when it comes to this safety. Here, they're also raising the question of, will the series or this pilot help advance an agreement with Gaza? Here, and look at this. The great achievement for Israel, say sources in Jerusalem, is the disconnection of arenas. So Israel is trying to portray it as a disconnection. Limited, not limited, ceasefire now, ceasefire tomorrow. What do we have in the agreement? Nothing. Nothing elaborated with that, okay? But they are saying that this is a disconnection. Although from a Hezbollah perspective, no one said anything about the disconnection. But here they're saying that there might be some sort of a ceasefire with Gaza as well, especially when it comes to the American estimation. And when it comes to the American estimation of having a potential ceasefire with Gaza as well to be followed, that means a lot for Israel. Why does it mean a lot? Because the United States, they decide. If the United States wants to stop this, we could have stopped it a year ago. The United States is enabling all of this and pushing for all of this. Now, when it comes to the damage, of course, and we're talking about what's leading to this moment. And again, nothing is confirmed so long as we don't have a cabinet approval, okay? A cabinet approval tomorrow. Netanyahu is going to be sitting down with the cabinet and talking tomorrow. This is one of the other reasons that they're having this. Israeli spy unit 8,200 in the worst crisis in its history. They have been targeted by Hezbollah so many times in the Galilot. U.S. news site Axis, quoting former Israeli intelligence officer, said that the occupation's army's Unit 8,200 cyber spy outfit is in the worst crisis in history after its failures following the 7th of October and repeated successful strike inflicted on it. Don't forget, Yossi Sariel is still missing. The head of 8,200 unit. Hezbollah targeted them, and at the time there was a confirmation that 73 people were killed from that unit, and all of a sudden Sariel resigns after a while, not to be seen after that. many indications say that he was killed, the head of the 8,200 unit. But again, of course, Israel did not confirm. However, we haven't seen anything from him. So these repeated blows are very, very important when it comes to reaching this moment, when it comes to Hezbollah. So in short, and to wrap up this whole scenario, there are positive signs coming from all sides, Israel, from Lebanon, from the United States. We haven't had any confirmation from Hezbollah about anything. From their perspective, they're continuing to fight, and there's a negotiation process, fine. But they're focusing on what they have to do. But in Israel, there's a massive campaign to try and justify this potential ceasefire that the people most concerned with, who are the residents of the north, of the occupied territories, are calling it a submission agreement to Hezbollah. Basically, Israel submitting to the will, backing down to Hezbollah, and accepting everything to do with them, and neglecting the people of the north, calling Benjamin Netanyahu prime minister with the blood of the people of the north on his hands. They're not even blaming Hezbollah, they're blaming Benjamin Netanyahu. And with regards to Gaza, again, certain things will be shady in that period. During this period, many corrupt voices will try and instill division between both resistance fronts or the other resistance movements as well in the region, to talk about all sorts of scenarios and try and cause problems. This is what Israel wants, and this is what the United States wants. So this is something very important that many people need to be wary of, because like I said, Hezbollah, after the people of Gaza and the Lebanese resistance, they have been the biggest side sacrificing for Gaza when other Arab governments and regimes have been spending their money and time partying while the people of Gaza are killed. The Lebanese resistance has sacrificed the most following the Palestinian resistance, and we are still talking about a continuation of the resistance fronts, albeit in different types of dynamics, with different types of interpretations based on different developments. Because don't forget, in the beginning with Lebanon, it was a supporting front, and later on, it became a war as well. I hope this summarizes the situation when it comes to the ceasefire, and of course, more can be spoken about in that regard, especially as to why Israel is taking this position. But just to wrap up the whole thing. And the second thing that I want to talk to you about, is a couple of statements coming from the supreme leader of Iran, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. He had a speech during which there was a ceremony for the Basij in Iran, and he had a meeting with them, a speech really to them, to talk about recent developments. So he spoke about internal stuff, but part of his speech was in relation to Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and the resistance fronts in the region, and during which he stated a couple of important things. One of them is the ICC's arrest warrants are not enough and that Benjamin Netanyahu should be executed. This is what Sayyid Ali Khamenei said. He has faith that the resistance is victorious. All assumptions of the enemy's victory are wrong. The resistance is victorious in Gaza and in Lebanon. The images of destruction in Gaza and in Lebanon are against Israel, not for it. It's a proof for its failure, trying to cover it up. The ICC's arrest warrant against Netanyahu is not enough. There should be a death sentence handed to Netanyahu. He should be executed. Israel continues to kill innocent civilians, and its continuation of that adds more power to the resistance. The more fierce the enemy is against civilians, the stronger the resistance gets, because it adds more fuel to them. The resistance front will increase in coming months and years after these Israeli crimes. The interesting point, well, of course, two interesting points. The fact that he's asking for capital punishment for Benjamin Netanyahu. And, well, Hizbullah have confirmed that they are trying to kill him. So they are trying to actually implement that death sentence for Benjamin Netanyahu. And also the fact that we are talking about a growth in the resistance front. This is an interesting point from the supreme leader of Iran, the fact that he's talking about an increase in the resistance front. What does that mean? Does that mean he's talking about more movements joining in, or countries going in the resistance fronts? Well, we heard talks previously about more countries joining in, and more countries having organizations that will be focused primarily on resistance. But that could be implemented in multiple ways. Now, that's happening with an increased collaboration between not only Iran and the existing resistance fronts, but Iran and other countries too. Other countries that are, some of them are surprising. So will they declare certain things after that? Again, we don't know, but the statement is quite interesting. And we also had, I wanted to clarify further when it comes to the position of Hamas when it comes to the ceasefire. This was the statement, or some of the statements that came from the senior figure of Hamas, Sam Hamdan. He had an interview with Al-Mayadeen. He said, Hizbullah helped our people. Hizbullah helped our people, and any announcement of a ceasefire in Lebanon makes us happy. Hamas leader Sam Hamdan confirms Palestinian resistance positions regarding the negotiations on Gaza and talks the situation of the Israeli prisoners in the Strip. He spoke with Al-Mayadeen, confirming that the occupying entity is trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve what it failed to achieve in the field, saying that it will not happen. Hamdan explained in an interview with Al-Mayadeen today, that Monday, that talk about a 5-day truce in Gaza and then returning to fighting does not achieve the Palestinians' demanding, we are concerned with stopping the aggression against our people. He said the occupation wants to retrieve prisoners by the resistance, and for the latter to raise the flag of surrender and then decide whether it wants to stop the war or not. We are trying to protect our people with strategic protection by removing this entity so that the region can live in security and peace. He continued in relation to the Israeli prisoners, because don't forget we had a declaration that one of them was killed by an Israeli strike, like over half of them now. If news of the resistance captors is cut off, news of the Israeli prisoners is cut off. The resistance member who cares for the Israeli prisoner is martyred. Their lives become in danger when they lose those who care for them. No one can make any certainty about the status of the prisoners in Gaza. Regarding the relationship with Qatar, Hamas leader confirmed that this relationship was expressed Doha by saying that we say that our relationship with Qatar is deeper than what the occupation is trying to show. Now, with regards to the ceasefire in Lebanon, on the Lebanese front, Hamdan described what happened yesterday when the resistance carried out 51 operations as one of God's glorious days, stressing that it was a clear message from the Lebanese resistance to the Israeli occupation. He also pointed out that Islamic resistance in Lebanon continues despite all the sacrifices and makes the occupation pay the price, and its officials go into shelters. The announcement of a ceasefire in Lebanon makes us happy because Hezbollah stood by our people and made great sacrifices. Hamdan stressed that the resistance in Lebanon deserves to be supported despite all attempts by some to incite division and strife on sectarian grounds. This is very important. Noting that we in the axis of resistance trust each other and coordinate on all details. These statements are important. Any announcement makes us happy in Lebanon. It should be supported. The resistance, despite all attempts by some to incite division and strife on sectarian grounds, noting that we in the axis of resistance trust each other and coordinate all the details. But you will still hear some people coming up and trying to cause frictions and problems, to deviate from the other party's problems and divisions and the fact that they are on their way out, completely out. As for the internal Palestinian issue, Hamdan announced the success of the Cairo meeting with the Fatah movement in agreeing on a framework to form a committee to manage the affairs on the Gaza Strip. This is happening simultaneously with the talks that have been happening in Lebanon. Because don't forget, before Hamas told them we're not talking. He pointed out that a second meeting with Fatah was expected to complete the arrangement, but that was delayed due to developments including the martyrdom of Yahya Sinwar. He stressed that the Hamas position is that the national unity government should be formed to manage the affairs for the Palestinians, but this has not been approved yet. This is an important statement clarifying the position of Hamas when it comes to Lebanon. And again, we're seeing developments on that front. And all of the talks about a ceasefire, both in Lebanon and potentially in Gaza too, are temporary. Nothing is yet concrete, nothing yet is complete. However, when it comes to Lebanon, it came following a massive defeat and humiliation of the genocide army in Gaza. The majority of the losses of the Israeli army have been in Gaza. Gaza's resistance targeted over 1,200 Israeli vehicles, 1,000 of which are Merkavas targeted. Some of them were destroyed completely. Others were damaged significantly. And in many cases, everything was burned, including troop carriers with the soldiers inside them. And then they decided, of course, Israel to go on this escalation with Lebanon, only to face a strong resistance in Lebanon. And of course, with the developments internally, with the massive losses in the army, you're talking about a failed army, failed state, failed economy, people refusing to serve in the army, people from all backgrounds refusing to serve more and more now in Israel. Many of these who are wounded have lost a limb or two. All of that is giving more pressure on them when it comes to Lebanon, especially because of Hezbollah's stronger position too. They tried to weaken the position of Hezbollah, but they did not succeed. Again, they think they can kill the spirit of the people, and their love for the resistance. But again, that fails. But however, all of the talk is temporary. Tomorrow we're going to have a confirmation coming from Israel after the cabinet meeting of Benjamin Netanyahu with his cabinet, whether they approve or not. If they do approve, we're talking about a pilot of 60 days. Following that, what will happen in the meantime in Gaza, all of these things will be clarified as well in coming days too. And this is what I want to share with you in this live stream. Let me check if you have any input as well for me. Aini Anwar LD. Studio Rainer, thank you all for your super. Studio Rainer saying, any update regarding Turkey and Yemen? I'd love to see that con artist leader lose his power. If anyone is the chosen people, it's the Yemeni. God bless them. Well, no more progress apart from the previous statements. And if any of you, by the way, are asking what's this in relation to, Yemen targeted a ship called Anadolu S. Yemen do not target, or Ansarullah in Yemen in particular, what is more commonly known as the Houthis. Their name is Ansarullah, and they're fighting from Yemen. They target a ship called Anadolu S because they had reason to believe, based on their actions in the Red Sea, that this was linked with Israel, although Turkey declared that they cut ties with Israel. No confirmation if it was linked to Israel or not to the Turkish side, but Turkey said, we condemn this. And there were reports that they were sending warships to the region. The warship thing hasn't been clarified further. There was only that confirmation, and Turkey said that we are working to get this resolved as soon as possible. Things didn't escalate a lot following that too. But again, the fact that they targeted that ship, you might have something escalating as well. Perceived reality. Hi, Mahmoud. Do you think the ceasefire will be signed? Who does it benefit? 60-day pause with closely coincides with the U.S. inauguration day. Interesting observation. I think Israel is losing tremendously, both in Gaza and Lebanon. They have been trying to cover up their massive failure with barbarism and mass destruction against the civilian population. But the fact of the matter is the resistance in Gaza, which is considered to be the weakest or the least equipped when it comes to the resistance fronts, has shown the genocide entity things that hasn't seen ever in history. Firstly, they liberated Palestinian occupied territories on the 7th of October. They defeated the whole division in the matter of 2 hours. And they also took prisoners of war from Israel's top division on the 7th of October. And then with the year of massive genocide and starvation campaign, they are still able to give them blows after blows, day after day. Today, 20 of them were taking down, 20 genocide troops in North Gaza. North Gaza that has a blockade on it, and they're trying to starve people to death in it. Can you imagine that? Likewise with Lebanon. So they sunk in the sands of Gaza, and they were eaten by the mountains of Lebanon. That's what happened to these child murderers, trying to show as if they own the land. And these people you're talking about imposters who occupied lands illegally, people who come from foreign lands, acting like they're somehow promised an entity, facade after facade, trying to fight against the native people of the region. These people are the land. The Palestinians in Gaza are the sand of Gaza, are the land of Gaza. The Lebanese people in Lebanon, they are the mountains and trees of Lebanon. You can't fight nature like that. No way. You can try and use whatever you like. And that's why they are being humiliated. Their armies, tens of thousands of killed and wounded, hundreds of thousands with problems, millions leaving the country, millions losing any sort of belief in this facade, supremacist, ugly ideology of Zionism and everyone who supports it. Yesterday, we spoke about a poll in the United States saying a third of Jewish people, Jewish Americans in certain ages, support Hamas blatantly. You know what I mean? Everything is going against this genocide entity, and this talk about a ceasefire is a proof that they are being humiliated and unable to achieve anything when it comes to Lebanon, like they are unable to achieve anything with Gaza. In Lebanon, they have 5 divisions. They wanted to reach Beirut. They were thinking that, now we killed, Nasrallah, we're going to reach Beirut. Only for just, 2-3 Hizbullah fighters to be fighting them for fighting 20, 30 people for hours. And they're giving them blows after blows. So this serves the Lebanese. It will give them a period where they wouldn't be at risk, as much risk as now, being for their children to be murdered by this genocide child murdering entity, or for civilian buildings to be bombed, or for healthcare facilities to be bombed, or anyone walking in the street, an ambulance, something being bombed by these depraved child murderers of this genocide. So that's good for them. And let's hope we also reach something, even if it's temporary in Gaza. But fact of the matter is the Palestinian resistance are very keen on not having anything temporary with Gaza. And they are only talking about either give us a solution or no solution. You want war, we'll continue war forever. But this is how Gaza's approach is. Because temporary ceasefires were offered to the Palestinian resistance, they refused them. But Hezbollah, based on their developments, they decided to go ahead with that. And again, what should be understood is you should need to understand the dynamics of each front and the societies in each front and the state of each, or the geography, everything. You need to understand that there's a separation when it comes to that, in terms of differentiation, differences. And yeah, maybe there was certain pressure coming from the United States administration. Look, the United States administration is the most evil administration on earth, more evil than the Zionist administration. Why? Because they run this, behind the scenes. They support this. They are in charge of all of this. American-made bombs, American-made planes, American-made everything, American money. This is what funds this. This is what supports this, legitimizes this. So in many cases, the Western politicians, the Western people in power, and any proxy of the United States, and of course primarily the United States, they're worse than Israel when it comes to that. They can stop it. And clearly, if they said something to Israel, then Israel will have to listen like a little dog. You know what I mean? They have to listen. They have to obey. If the United States says no more weapons from tomorrow, they'll shut up and they'll stop everything. You're talking about cowards who are only used to bomb people with innocent civilians with missiles. While fighting, we saw what's happening in the fighting on the ground in Gaza and in Lebanon. We saw the fighting. 1 versus 10. That's what's happened. The resistance won, 10 genocide soldiers running away like dogs with their tails between their legs. But they act like, they are this and that with the fighter jets against civilians. We saw who they kill, right? The most depraved nation on earth. Only the lowest of the low conduct such attacks. Hospitals, children, tents, refugee camps, schools, housing refugees, mosques, churches, universities, ambulances. They go over bodies. Do you want me to continue talking? We know how ugly their actions are in Gaza. So Donald Trump could be pushing for a temporary reduction, maybe. But listen, the most important thing, and the thing that is leading to these temporary ceasefires, is the strength of the resistance. That's it. That's the main thing. The strength of the resistance in Lebanon. That's what's imposing. And the dynamics and the fact that you're talking about an army that has already been exhausted by Gaza. And what will lead to a solution also in Gaza is the Palestinian resistance. All respect to anyone who supports and talks and the fact of the matter is there are people who are steadfast and standing up against this genocide, and they have a resistance supporting them too. That's what stops this entity, because they understand nothing but the language of force. If there was no force against them, they would have occupied everything in the region. But again, this could be having, Hochstein give them a deadline. But again, all of that could be a cover-up for Netanyahu, right? To tell him, look, I'll give you a way out, to try and sell it. And again, temporary. And firstly, let's see if he signs it tomorrow. And after that, you're talking about a pilot of 2 months. Galliburg, let's not forget in April when we were close to a ceasefire in Gaza, and then immediately IF invaded the Rafah crossing. Yeah. Again, nothing can be confirmed. That's why we say they're just talks. But of course, we analyze all of these talks and, talk about the potential of that happening. And again, the situation in Lebanon is not exactly like it is in Gaza. Israel suffered much more losses from April to this day, Gaza gave them massive humiliation. So he could, of course, they're not to be trusted. The Israeli Zionist regime is not to be trusted. The American regime is not to be trusted. And anyone flying, moving in that sphere, they're not to be trusted. They always break their promises. And Turkish Truther saying, thank you. Keep up the good work. Thank you, my friend. I will. Do we still think Iran will retaliate? Yeah, I think the Iranian retaliation is coming regardless of a ceasefire or not. The only thing they told Israel is if you stop killing people, committing a genocide, and killing children, we will reconsider the severity of the response. And if there isn't anyone with an ounce of brain in this genocide entity who understands, they will get the message. Iran's going to give them a blow. How hard it is depends on if they behave or not. They're this genocidal entity. And that was from Ansa Benji. Salam Mahmoud, can genocide force totally withdraw from Gaza permanently? Yeah, they can. They will end up withdrawing from Gaza in the short term, in my opinion. Whether it happens sooner or later, they will have to withdraw because you need to understand why they withdraw initially. I mean, Israel withdrew in 2005, their unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. They withdrew because like 9 soldiers were killed in a year. At the time, you know, there was a time where Israel as a state used to care a little bit more about their soldiers' lives. Now they lost the plot completely. That's what people need to understand. They started to not kind of care about anything. But many people are talking about that. Look, Gallant, who went out, he said that there is no security justification for us to remain in Gaza, and the cost of us remaining in Gaza is exceptionally heavy. But Netanyahu has people in his government like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who have dreams of settling in Gaza over the bodies of dead Palestinian infants and you know, skeletons and stuff like that. They're sick and twisted like that. So he wants to implement that for them. But again, Gaza has been known to be a fierce resistance hub, even in history. And they cannot be beaten, simply cannot be beaten. There will forever be a resistance up until Zionism is wiped off the face of the earth, forever. And in the short term, there will be an armed resistance up until the occupying genocide war criminal regime is wiped off and removed off the face of the earth. There will be resistance because resistance is an antidote. It's a side effect. It's a symptom to a problem. A virus. That virus is still there. That virus, so long as it's not removed, or cancer, or whatever you want to call it, the resistance will remain there. You want to get rid of the resistance? Get rid of the reasons that the resistance exists upon. Occupation, injustice, ethnic cleansing, genocide, alongside other things too. But they will continue both in Gaza and in other locations too. And Studio, thank you again. He said, what does Turkey think they can do? The U.S. Navy couldn't do much. No, the U.S. Navy was forced out and humiliated. Ansarullah expelled the USS Eisenhower and Abraham Lincoln like nothing, like peanuts. And that was Yemen only expelling them. So what can Turkey do? Nothing. If Turkey turns on Iran, they'll have Russia to deal with. Yes, they will. And I think sometimes Erdogan speaks too much, to be fair. And he tries to discredit Iran sometimes too, especially with this attack in April. But I don't like that. And they can't do much with Ansarullah. And it's better for them to act like they're talking or just don't talk. Simply don't talk. And you said, I hope you can continue to see Orthodox Christians and Muslims united like in Russia and the hatred. I think the unity is between every peace-loving human being rather than just Orthodox Christians and Muslims. What has been happening clearly showed you that you have human beings who actually have certain values, shared common values, universal values, and they stand up for them. People who are free people, who have values, and who are also open and brave too. You need to have these qualities. Being united for common causes that are simple because they are universal for us as a human species. You see, what's happening in the West Asian region is a fight for human rights globally. And that has been evident because the cancer that exists there in the form of this rotten Zionist, depraved supremacist ideology exists in Westminster, in Washington, in other Western capitals. It exists everywhere, this cancer, right? And people are starting to wake up for that and realize that. And that they don't just have a problem with this genocide entity there, but this genocide entity is a representation of something far bigger, existing not in that area, but existing somewhere else and originating from somewhere else. So I think that's uniting every human being with an ounce of dignity. Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, whatever they are. And I hope that would give an example to human beings on how they can unite in general as human beings with current things that they share and respect each other with the things that they have differences upon. Simple. Why? Because you will never unite people over one thing. Never in your life. That's not going to happen. And people will still have their differences. However, that shows you that there are things that can be in common between all of us, that we can talk about and share and stand up for or against. Marvin Vergas question: the U.S. has a massive Christian Zionist presence. The United States has the biggest Zionist presence in terms of Christianity. What is Christian Zionist presence in the UK? Less likely because the UK is a majority non-religious country, and followed by Christianity, then Islam, and then other religions too. Name, not necessarily any name, but the Zionist lobby controls. Has a big hold on people. The prime minister is a Zionist, Keir Starmer, alongside others. But the power and fierceness of Zionism, as it exists in the United States, doesn't exist anywhere else. By the way, however, it sure as hell exists in the United Kingdom because it originated from Britain. Zionism, as in the granting of the state of Israel, not Zionism as an ideology. Zionism as an ideology, Theodor Herzl, but the United Kingdom was a hub. The previous British Empire was a hub for this Zionism because it was in line. It was also in line with their empire ideologies and colonial ideas in the West Asian region. So they are very powerful here, like they are very powerful in other locations too. But that power is about to be wiped off. US and APAC and other pro-Zionist coalitions in Congress. How is Zion lobby in the UK? The Zionist lobby in the United Kingdom is blatant, by the way, to a large extent. There was a report, an undercover investigation on them in 2018, and how they pay British politicians and how they bring them to Israel, give them perks and stuff like that. That's only the proven stuff, right? Because there are other things that are hidden. And you can see the media and its Zionism, how Zionist the media is. They ignore the genocide. They support Israel completely. They never treat both sides equally. The British establishment tries to constantly intimidate the people who support Palestine. And there have been attempts by politicians to relate Zionism to Semitism, anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism. Imagine how twisted that is. Well, it's like these people are already not Semites. And you want to make Zionism Semitism? What the hell is wrong with you? But all of this facade and propaganda is being revealed. It's being revealed to the public. You can't try and hide it, no matter how much you work. And these people, the Zionist lobby and the Zionists in general, they thrive in the dark, and they have a big problem now that everything is being published, almost everything. But still, wherever you have governments or people in power shameful enough, or even organs of that establishment willing to serve such war criminals, it shows you that the establishment in the West is morally depraved. The Western establishment power is morally bankrupt, and that's why it's declining. They are morally bankrupt, supporting a genocide, trying to stand up against anyone opposing this genocide, and that's why you're seeing a difference in the world now happening. It's because of this blatant inconsistency and moral depravity, supporting a genocide entity, right? The fact that some of these countries still arm Israel. How shameful of you. How inhumane. Supporting a country murdering children, right? Shows you who they are, the people who deal with Israel or operate for an establishment that serves Israel too, by the way. Operating for an establishment that serves a genocidal entity makes you complicit. People need to remember that. Anyone within that establishment serving what's happening. But again, the biggest problem is the United States. But guess what? The United States is failing too now, slowly. Where are their strongest points in the United States? The evangelical community, right? Go look for the polls, recent polls in the evangelical community, young and old, and see the difference that what happened in the past years making between them. A community that is traditionally Zionist for their own purposes, by the way, not for their love of Jewish people. They're the most Jew-hating people, by the way, some of these people. They just serve Zionism for certain ideologies, right? But that's also changing. Even in the United States of America. Okay, let's take one or two more questions. And Magdi Badawi, Andrew Wojcicki, I hope I pronounced that well. Thank you so much. And Studio Rainer again. And Takfa Azul and Riza, thank you very much. Studio Rainer, Americans must remember that they have a voice. They indeed have a voice. They don't embrace hopelessness. We have voting, we have the ballot or the bullet. It's our responsibility to remove the corruption, not a foreign power. Yeah, but I mean, look, the establishment of the United States is still controlled by the powers, right, that are there. Takfa Azul, if Israel agrees to a ceasefire, that means they ran out of bombs. Another argument, they would. There's a problem with the supply too, but the supply of people willing to die for this ethno state. It's many things. It's the army's losses. It's the weapons. It's the internal problems. It's the fierce resistance and lack of security. They don't have an answer. Don't underestimate what Hizbullah did yesterday to Israel. Do not underestimate that. And again, landing missiles, no interception. All of that. The main thing that is stopping these criminals is armed resistance. That's the main thing. And then talk about all of the other stuff and everything that builds up on that armed resistance against them too, by the way. Losses in terms of the genocide forces, losses of their military equipment, losses of how many people willing to fight, losses of people willing to be recruited, losses financially, losses internally, all of that. And Riza, you said Samir Ja'ja, the traitor, has been an agent of the child-killing entity for decades, an enemy of the resistance. Yes, he is. He's a massive traitor with the blood of innocent people on his hands, who, funny enough, is still there in Lebanon. You know, that's the weird thing, you know. But hey, we have people, certain elements, to be more specific, in the Palestinian Authority, who celebrate the attacks on Gaza. Celebrate it. And that shows you that this thing is beyond the people and even their ethnicities too. Like, who would think someone Lebanese saying what Israel is doing in Lebanon will be an opportunity for us to correct the path, like this Ja'ja person is saying, right? They're killing your children. And he's saying, oh no, the Israeli attacks are a way to correct the situation. Jimmy I is just reading breaking news. Russia has notified that they will be hitting the US military base in Poland. The US establishment is getting what it deserves globally. They've been bullying everyone, and Russia has been poking Russia 24/7. They get what they deserve, and they put their own people's lives at risk. Sayyid Ahmed, I wonder if now Netanyahu can be arrested in other countries. Can Israel do this itself? Oh no, they won't do this themselves. As a matter of fact, they're trying to defend him, even the opposition, because to them that's a problem. That's a big problem coming from the ICC. By the way, this threat, it's from 4 days ago. The threat of to bomb a US base in Poland. Apparently is sending missiles to the comedian genocide supporting puppet. Okay. And I'll take the last one from Perceived Reality, saying Hezbollah should not allow Israel to dictate the terms. The loser doesn't get to dictate your thoughts. No, it's Hezbollah dictating the terms, because Hezbollah are treating Israel and talking to Israel with the only language that Israel understands, and that is the language of force. And that reality will be something that is going to be represented in future agreements too. And that reality is going to be the thing that will seal the fate of this genocide entity once and for all. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Thank you so much for everyone who participated. Apologies, of course, if we weren't able to reach all of your comments. Riza, Takfa, Studio, Andrew, Magdi, LD, Aini, Anwar, Riza, thank you all. I'll hopefully be with you with a video after this live stream and another live stream tomorrow. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.